The phone vibrated on the very morning his ex-wife stepped into a wedding dress, and the DNA test results arrived before a single word of blessing was spoken. Noah Carter was not at the ceremony. He was sitting alone in a narrow motel room near the highway, gray morning light spilling through a dust-smeared window and stretching across a cheap wooden table. The paper cup of coffee in front of him had gone cold long ago, the steam gone, leaving behind a faint metallic burnt smell. His phone lay face down on the table, vibrating softly and steadily, like a living thing with a restless pulse. He did not touch it, not yet. He already knew what that call would carry. A voice wrapped in forced politeness, breath quickened and hidden behind practiced control. People who had spent their lives buying silence with money, now discovering that money could not buy everything. 3 weeks earlier, Noah himself had smiled, picked up a pen, and signed the divorce settlement. He signed slowly and carefully, as if closing a business deal rather than ending a marriage that had lasted more than 10 years. They wired a sum into his account that most people would call life-changing, an amount large enough to paint him as greedy in the eyes of anyone watching from the outside, an amount neat enough to make them believe the story was finished. They were wrong. Outside the window, the motel parking lot was coming to life. A man loaded suitcases into the trunk of a rental car. A woman cradled a coffee cup in both hands, as if holding something fragile. Life moved on, steady and indifferent, unaware that somewhere else, wedding flowers were arranged with care, music stood ready, and a truth was clawing its way through the polished surface of a powerful family. Noah sat upright, his hands resting lightly on the table. They did not shake. There was no restlessness in him. His stillness was not surrender. It was the calm of a man who had seen the entire map long before anyone else realized they were lost. In his mind, memory rewound to the night everything began. Madeline had kissed his forehead in a kitchen that was too brightly lit. The kiss was light, cool, precise, exactly the way she always did when she wanted to appear gentle without having to be close. She said everything would be fine, her voice low and even like a line rehearsed in front of a mirror. The dishwasher hummed behind her, its steady noise filling the gaps no one wanted to name. 5 minutes later, Noah's phone rang. It was his mother-in-law. Her voice was almost cheerful, the kind of cheerfulness people use when they are about to negotiate something ugly. She asked him to come by the house that night to talk. Madeline did not ask who was calling. She was already reaching for her coat. That was when Noah understood. This was not a conversation. It was a script, and he had missed the rehearsal. In his in-laws' living room, everything was perfect to the point of feeling hollow. The smell of polished wood art displayed to impress, rather than to be enjoyed. Wine glasses already set out as if waiting for him to accept his fate. The family lawyer sat there, posture rigid, gray suit, immaculate, the calm smile of a man accustomed to controlling crises. The envelope slid across the table toward Noah. Inside was a single number, printed cleanly and politely enough to make most people forget the only question that mattered. Where was the truth? Noah asked it, and the room fell silent, a silence heavier than any confession. When he signed, they relaxed. They thought he was looking at the money. They did not understand that Noah always looked for traces. Every signature, every confidentiality clause, every moment of urgency left a mark. And when those marks were aligned, they told a very different story. Back in the present, the phone vibrated again, stronger now, more insistent. Noah lifted the cup and took a small sip. The cold bitterness spread across his tongue and pulled him fully into the moment. He set the cup down, turned the phone over, but still did not answer. Because somewhere else at that very moment, someone was realizing that the child they believed was their shield was actually a spark. And Noah Carter, the man they had dismissed as easy to buy, was the only one who was not panicking. They did not speak of separation. They presented a number. That night, Noah Carter sat in his in-laws' living room and understood that everything had been decided before he ever stepped through the door. There were no questions, no negotiations, only a clean script already laid out on a polished wooden table. The air carried the scent of lemon polish and inherited wealth, even the lighting too perfect to allow emotion a place to settle. Hours earlier, Madeline had kissed his forehead in the kitchen they shared. The kiss was light and cold, stopping just short of indifference, never close enough to be called intimate. She said everything would be fine, her voice low and steady, unbroken, unrehearsed in appearance, yet practiced in truth. The dishwasher hummed behind her, its steady noise acting like a curtain, so the lies would not have to face the silence. Noah nodded, not because he believed her, but because nodding was easier than asking questions whose answers he already knew. 5 minutes later, his phone rang. It was his mother-in-law, her voice unusually cheerful, the kind of cheer that surfaces right before someone begins to bargain with another person's fate. She asked him to come over that night to talk. Madeline did not ask who was calling. She quietly reached for her coat, her movements quick and precise, like someone repeating a motion she had already practiced. In that moment, Noah understood. This was not a conversation. It was a performance, and he had arrived late. His in-laws' house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac where trees were trimmed weekly and neighbors waved without ever really meeting each other's eyes. Inside, everything was immaculate. The art on the walls was not meant to be enjoyed, only displayed. Wine glasses had been set out without anyone asking. Every detail said the same thing they had prepared for him. His father-in-law sat upright, hands resting on his knees, like a man awaiting a verdict. His mother-in-law stood by the fireplace, her smile fixed in place. And beside them, perfectly cast for the role, was a man in a gray suit, the family lawyer with the calm posture of someone accustomed to extinguishing problems before they could ignite. His mother-in-law did not wait for him to sit. She slid a thick envelope across the table, cream-colored and heavy in the hand. Inside was a single page, a number printed cleanly and politely, as if courtesy itself could replace the truth. A sum large enough to buy his disappearance. She spoke quickly and smoothly, as though explaining warranty terms. Sign the divorce papers tonight, take the money, and move on. No mention of the past, no statements, no questions. Madeline stood near the window with her back to him. Streetlight spilled across her face in a pale wash. She stared outside, as if the dark road held answers she did not want to hear. Noah did not ask why, or how long, or who. Betrayal rarely arrives in a single moment. It comes in fragments, a changed password, a late meeting, a look that passes through you instead of landing on you. He asked only one thing, his voice calm enough to make his mother-in-law hesitate. What about the rest? She tilted her head, genuinely confused. The rest of what? The truth, Noah said. The room fell silent, a silence that rang louder than any confession. His father-in-law cleared his throat and said this was best for everyone. Noah looked at Madeline. She did not turn around. In that instant, something inside him went quiet. Not broken, just shut off like an empty room after the furniture has been removed. He smiled, and his mother-in-law frowned. "Congratulations," Noah said. She asked what he was congratulating. He replied the new chapter, the baby, the wedding, the life everyone had been so careful to keep him out of. Madeline finally turned. Her face tightened not with guilt, but with irritation, as if Noah were making things more difficult than necessary. The lawyer slid a folder toward him. Divorce papers, a confidentiality agreement, clauses broad enough to bury a lifetime of truth. "Sign here," the man said smoothly. "The funds will be transferred immediately." Noah picked up the pen, then paused. He asked for notarization, immediate court filing, and a wire transfer that night into his name. His mother-in-law exhaled in relief and smiled, believing she had won. They thought Noah was focused on the money. They did not understand that money always leaves footprints, and footprints always tell a story. The money hit Noah's account before he even left the building, fast enough to convince anyone watching that everything had been calculated long in advance. The notary room was dim and cold, the smell of old paper mixed with overworked air conditioning. Rows of chairs stood in neat lines, people sitting quietly waiting for their lives to be stamped and sealed. Noah sat there with his back straight, his hand resting on the scarred wooden table, the pen fitting into his fingers like a familiar tool. He signed his name without shaking, without hesitation. One stroke, then another, each line firm and deliberate as if he were signing a business agreement rather than ending a marriage. Madeline signed after him. Her hand trembled just enough for a careful observer to notice. Her mother signed faster, cleaner, precise like someone accustomed to closing matters with paperwork. The lawyer nodded with professional satisfaction, his thin smile resembling that of a man who had just locked a door without letting anyone look back inside. The transfer confirmation chimed on Noah's phone while he was still seated. A short, emotionless notification announced that an enormous sum had changed hands. To them, it was the final period. To Noah, it was the first footprint. He saved everything: the transfer receipt, the confirmation email screenshots, copies stored in the cloud. Not out of fear, but out of habit. Noah had spent his life organizing information, noticing details others dismissed, understanding that the most dangerous thing was not a lie, but haste. When he stepped outside, cold air struck his face. The city moved on traffic, flowing pedestrians staring into their phones, unaware that a life had just been compressed into a thin folder. Madeline stood a few steps away, her eyes avoiding his. Something lingered on her lips, unsaid. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder, a familiar gesture of reassurance, as if everything were still under control. Noah did not say goodbye. He did not need to. The people staying behind were already busy rehearsing the version of the story they planned to tell themselves. That night, Noah returned to the house that had once been his. It no longer felt like a home, only a container for memories. He closed the door behind him, the lock clicking sharply, sounding more like a signal than a sound. He did not turn on the lights right away. He stood in the darkness for a few seconds, letting the familiar scent of wood fabric and an old life pass over him one last time. He began packing slowly. No panic. No rush. Each item placed into a box carried a silent decision. Not the decision of a man abandoned, but of someone who understood he no longer belonged there. At the bottom of an old drawer beneath faded insurance documents, Noah found a thin folder. He paused, his hand suspended in the air. Inside was his own medical file from years earlier, following a procedure Madeline rarely remembered. The doctor's words were still clear. Low probability of conception. Possible, but unlikely. Especially unlikely in rare cases. Noah sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress creaked softly beneath his weight. The room smelled of laundry detergent and something else indistinct, like the scent of endings. He did not feel anger. He did not feel grief. Instead, a cold focus settled into his chest. If Madeline was pregnant, and if it was twins, then that probability was not just low. It was nearly non-existent. His phone buzzed, a message from Madeline saying she hoped he was okay. Noah did not reply. He set the phone aside, held the file in his hands, and read each line as though assembling the final pieces of a picture. Now he understood why everything had moved so fast, why the money had been wired immediately, why the confidentiality clauses were wide enough to swallow the truth. They did not just want him gone. They wanted him gone before the truth had time to enter the room. Noah closed the box and sealed it carefully. He did not cry. He did not sigh. He looked around the room one last time. The walls remained silent, but the story inside them had changed. He carried his suitcase to the door and locked it behind him, and this time, when the lock clicked, it was no longer an ending. It was the beginning of a search they had already paid him to avoid. The confirmation email arrived before the apology Noah would never receive. He left the city that night carrying no anger, only a light suitcase and a thin folder pressed close to his chest, as if it could feel his heartbeat. The motel sat beside the highway, anonymous beige walls, crooked framed art, and the constant hum of an air conditioner that never fully shut off. It was a place designed for people to disappear for a while. Noah chose it because anonymity has a way of exposing what others try to hide. On the first morning, he brewed coffee from the cheap machine by the sink. The metallic bitterness spread quickly, unpleasant, but precise. He drank it because ritual mattered more than comfort. When he opened his laptop, Noah did what he had always done best: he organized. The divorce filing confirmed, the wire transfer verified, the notarization saved. The confidentiality clauses highlighted line by line. The language was sharp and expansive, not written to protect feelings, but to protect reputations. The reputations of people who did not want the truth standing up too early. He sent the documents to Tessa Monroe, an old friend and paralegal, someone who recognized pressure even when it wore the mask of choice. The phone rang almost immediately. No greeting. "They pushed you," Tessa said. "No amicable divorce moves that fast." Noah stared at the blank wall. "They needed it done before something arrived late," he replied. "People only rush when they are afraid of something showing up after the deadline." That night, Noah slept for 4 straight hours, a deep hibernation. The next morning, his phone vibrated with a different sound. Not a call, an email. No greeting, only an automated header confirming a prenatal paternity test appointment. Scheduled midweek. Results due Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. His old email address, once used for shared insurance, was listed as an outdated emergency contact. They were in a hurry, hurried enough to forget to clean their footprints. Noah read the email twice, not because he did not understand it, but because he understood it too well. He forwarded it to Tessa without comment. Her reply came back immediately, written entirely in capital letters. "Do not contact anyone. Save everything." That afternoon, Noah walked aimlessly around the motel parking lot. The asphalt shimmered under the heat. Cars came and went. Families dragged suitcases. Children complained softly about directions and dinner. Life continued ordinary to the point of cruelty. On social media, Madeline's family was anything but discreet: photos of flowers, venue walkthroughs, captions about new beginnings. Noah did not feel jealous. He felt replaced, like a house emptied, repainted, and relisted before the previous owner had found a new address. That evening, a message from an unknown number appeared. "You should know they are pushing the test results before the wedding on purpose." Noah typed to ask who it was, erased. It typed again. "Why?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished. No reply. The next day, Tessa called again. "They are laying groundwork," she said. "Money plus confidentiality plus speed. That is not closure, that is containment." Noah asked if it could be undone. She paused, then said if there was coercion or hidden material facts, especially medical ones. Noah thought of the folder in his suitcase, the probabilities that bordered on impossible. He said he had something. "Do not tell me over the phone," Tessa cut in. "Just hold it." That night, Madeline called. Her name lit up the screen like old muscle memory. Noah almost did not answer. Almost. She asked if he had arrived safely, her voice thin and stretched. He said he had. Silence filled the line. In the background, he could hear laughter music planning. She said she never wanted it to be like this. "No one ever does," Noah replied. She asked why he did not fight. He said he did not need to. He heard her swallow. She said he was acting like he knew something. He said he knew enough. When she said he was not her enemy, Noah replied gently that he was not her cover story either. She hung up. Friday arrived too quietly. Noah woke before his alarm, showered, dressed, and sat by the window. His phone lay face down beside his coffee. 9:58. His hands steady. 10:01. The phone vibrated. 10:02. It rang. Noah did not answer immediately. Not out of fear, because he knew that somewhere else a story had just collapsed, and his silence was making it fall faster. When Noah finally answered the call, the breath on the other end shattered before any greeting could form. His mother-in-law's voice trembled, still trying to hold its shape, each word arranged, as if order itself might keep the truth from spilling out. She said there had been a small complication, something outside their expectations. The test results were not what they had hoped for. Noah did not ask what kind of complication. He did not need to. His silence forced her to continue, and every word that followed carried the sharp scent of panic. Behind her voice, chaos leaked through hurried footsteps, a door slammed too hard, someone crying and trying to stop. A man's voice cut in loud and sharp, denying everything with the fury of someone accustomed to giving orders. It was Gavin, the man meant to stand at the altar. He said the lab had made a mistake, that these things happened. Noah replied slowly and evenly that tests like this do not fail in that way. The sentence was short, but it cut cleanly. There was a brief, stunned silence. Then Madeline spoke. Her voice had lost its shape. She said it was not wrong. Only 2 words, but they fell like a heavy object. The line went dead. Noah stared at the dark screen reflecting his own face, calm enough that even he noticed the change. He did not stand right away. He stayed seated, listening to the hum of the air conditioner, the distant traffic on the highway, ordinary sounds, unaware that a wedding was cracking apart from the inside. 10 minutes later, his phone vibrated again. It was Tessa. She did not need to ask. They got the results, she said, and it blew up. Good, she exhaled slowly. That means they are scared. Noah rubbed his temples. He knew it was not over. Tessa knew it too. They were just switching tactics. That afternoon, Noah checked out of the motel and drove south. Not home. Not anywhere familiar. He chose a small coastal town where water and open sky stretched far enough to let thoughts breathe. The inn was modest wooden floors, creaking softly salt in the air. At night, Noah walked along the shoreline. The sand was cold beneath his shoes. The ocean moved steadily, indifferent to human messes. His phone buzzed constantly in his pocket. He did not answer. The next morning, he listened to a voicemail from Madeline. She was crying openly now. She said everything was worse than he thought. Everyone was panicking. Gavin was furious. Her mother kept saying they could fix it, but she did not know how. Noah sat on the edge of the bed, the curtains fluttering slightly in the breeze. He spoke quietly, as if to himself, saying he had not thought it would go this far, either. Near noon, a new email arrived. The subject mentioned clarification regarding the test results. The body explained there might have been an error in the chain of custody, and that further review was needed. Noah read it then, forwarded it to Tessa. Her reply came almost instantly. They are buying time. Do not give it to them. That evening another call came through. The man introduced himself as Daniel, his voice low and tight. He said he should not be calling, could not say much, but someone very powerful had pushed for the test to be rushed outside normal procedures. Noah asked who. There was a pause, then Daniel said it was not Gavin. The line cut immediately, as if someone had pulled the phone from his hand. On Sunday, social media went silent. No more flowers, no captions, no new beginnings. The sudden, complete quiet said more than any confession could. That night Tessa called again. "They will reach out soon," she said, "probably with another offer." Noah replied that he was not for sale. Tessa let out a short, humorless breath. They do not know that yet. Monday arrived with rain. Heavy, steady rain that slowed everything down. Noah sat in a small cafe near the pier, a cup of black coffee steaming in front of him. Just before 8 in the morning, an email from a secure address appeared. It was brief. "You deserve the full truth." The father is not a stranger. It is someone who has been in the room the entire time. Noah's stomach tightened, not from shock, but from recognition, like hearing a name that had always been there, but never spoken aloud. Seconds later, another message arrived. "If you want proof, meet me tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, alone. I have the recording." Noah closed his laptop. Outside, waves crashed against the rocks, loud and unapologetic. For the first time since he signed those papers, something inside him shifted. Not relief, not triumph, resolve. Because from this moment on, the story was no longer about betrayal or humiliation. It was about how far people were willing to go to bury the truth, and how loud that truth becomes when it starts digging its way out. He returned to the city the night before the wedding, not to watch them be happy, but to stand close enough to hear the truth when it finally broke. The small hotel near the courthouse looked exactly as it had before. Beige walls without character, the low mechanical hum of a ventilation system that never fully stopped. Noah set his suitcase down, plugged in his phone this time, leaving it face up on the desk like a patient waiting for a monitor to sound. He slept in fragments, broken pieces of rest that felt like old case files torn apart. Near morning, he took a cold shower, dressed neatly, and sat in the chair by the window. The sky outside was an almost offensive blue, the kind that promises happiness to people who still believe in clean endings. He poured coffee, but did not drink it. The phone buzzed again and again. Notifications stacked on the screen. Noah did not open them. 9:58. The air in the room thickened. 9:59. He breathed in slowly. At 10:02, the phone rang. It was his mother-in-law. Noah let it ring for one more beat before answering. Her voice was lower than usual, the polish stripped away. She said thank God he had answered. Noah leaned back in the chair and said he always did. On the other end, sound flooded in like a broken dam. Chairs scraping, voices overlapping, a sharp clatter, like glass set down too hard. She said the situation had escalated. Noah asked softly, had it? She said the test results had come back. Noah replied that he knew. Silence stretched between them. Then she asked how long he had known about the test. Noah looked down at the parking lot below, where a family was loading suitcases into a trunk, a child holding a worn, stuffed animal. He said she was the one who scheduled it. He had assumed she would receive the results. Her voice caught. Behind her, a man shouted not in anger, but in fear, a raw sound that did not belong in wedding halls or private clubs. Gavin grabbed the phone. He said the test was wrong, that the lab had made a mistake. Noah answered calmly that tests like that do not fail in that way. Gavin snapped, asking how Noah would know. Noah thought of what he had not said, then replied that if Gavin believed it was wrong, he could run it again. Something crashed, maybe a chair. Then Madeline's voice broke through, barely holding together, whispering that it was not wrong. The line went dead. Noah did not move. He sat there listening to the room breathe, to the traffic outside, to ordinary sounds continuing while someone else's story collapsed. 10 minutes later, Tessa called. She said they had received the results, and everything had blown up. Noah rubbed his forehead. He knew they were not finished. They were only changing tactics. The phone rang again, this time the family lawyer. His voice measured and soothing, asking everyone to calm down. Noah interrupted, saying that pushing the test before the wedding was not emotion, it was fear. The lawyer inhaled, and said the test had been necessary. Noah replied that it was necessary because there were questions they were afraid to ask too late. Somewhere in the background, someone sobbed. No one spoke for a moment. His mother-in-law jumped back in her voice, shaking, asking what Noah wanted. Noah said he wanted them to stop calling. A heavy thud sounded someone hitting a table. Gavin shouted that Noah was walking away while they cleaned up his mess. Noah waited until the noise faded, then said quietly that if Gavin thought this ended with him, he had read the room wrong. Madeline suddenly cried out, her voice wild, saying she had not done this alone. Silence dropped like stone. Then a scream cut through the line. Not hers, a man's scream, the kind adults make when they realize the ground has disappeared beneath them. Noah heard no more words. After that, only chaos, someone shouting Madeline's name, someone else ordering the music, turned off a door slamming. The lawyer came back on his composure, cracking, telling Noah this call had not happened, and that he should hang up. Noah replied that he was not thinking clearly. The line went dead. Noah set the phone down gently, as if it were fragile. A minute later, an email notification appeared, with a subject line updating the test results. Noah did not open it. He stared out the window instead. Below, guests were arriving. Valets opened doors. Life kept walking into a room where the truth was already screaming. A text arrived from an unknown number. It is worse than you think. The father is not Gavin, and it is not random. Noah typed a single word, then stopped. 3 dots appeared, held, then disappeared. He took a sip of his coffee. It was still cold, but everything else inside him felt sharp, aligned like a blade that had just been honed. The message arrived while the wedding had not yet been officially cancelled, and the truth had already begun moving faster than every lie. Noah stood in the hotel room with his phone in hand, rereading the short line from an unnamed number. It is worse than you think. The father of the baby is not Gavin, and it is not random. The words were simple, stripped of emotion, yet their weight pressed the air in the room downward, as if a door had just slammed shut. Noah was not surprised. The feeling inside him was like the final piece of a puzzle, clicking into place, not loud, only cold and exact. Outside, the city kept going. The elevator chimed. A group of guests laughed in the hallway. Down in the lobby, people still carried flowers, adjusted ribbons, checked guest lists. They did not know the story they were about to walk into had already rotted at its foundation. Noah set the phone on the table and looked straight into the mirror. The man staring back looked ordinary enough to be overlooked. No visible power, no symbols that demanded caution, and that ordinariness was exactly what had allowed him to see more than anyone else. The phone vibrated again. This time, it was Tessa. She did not circle around it. "There is a leak," she said. Not from the family, not from Gavin, from inside the system. Noah closed his eyes for a single beat. Someone had been close enough to hear what should never have been spoken, and scared enough not to want to drown with them. A second message arrived almost immediately. "You deserve the full truth." Noah did not reply. He understood the rhythm of people losing control. When the truth begins to seep out, they talk more than they should, faster than is safe. All he had to do was stand still and listen. Across the city, Madeline sat in a room where the music had stopped. Her wedding dress hung on its hook, still sharply creased. Her makeup was smudged, not from tears alone, but from wiping it away and putting it back on again, as if that could undo what was collapsing inside her. Her mother paced, calling, hanging up, calling again. Her father sat, frozen eyes fixed on the floor. Gavin had vanished from the room, his shouting still echoing down the hallway, like the tail end of a storm. The family lawyer called Noah again. His voice was low and controlled, but each sentence carried a small fracture at the edges. He said they needed to meet as soon as possible. Noah asked what for. To clarify misunderstandings, the lawyer replied. Noah allowed himself the faintest smile, unseen. Misunderstandings only exist in the absence of evidence. Emails began to pour in. One mentioned reviewing procedures. Another proposed extending confidentiality. Another spoke of goodwill and discreet solutions. Noah did not open them right away. He filed them into a folder and named it Footprints. Each message was another step backward for them, another mark pressed deeper into wet ground. That evening, Noah left the hotel and walked around the courthouse district. Streetlights cast pale yellow pools. The wind carried the smell of old rain. He thought about the years he had been underestimated, treated as the man in the background, the one who signed papers, the one who should be grateful for money offered in exchange for silence. They had never asked what he did before the marriage, never asked what systems he had built, what secrets he had safeguarded for people who trusted him. Noah's real power had never been a title. It lived in memory, in pattern recognition, in the ability to connect points others believed were scattered. Another message appeared. If you want proof, meet me tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, alone. I have the recording. Noah stopped beneath a streetlight and read the words like a door swinging open. A recording. The one thing capable of silencing people who had spent their lives hiding behind money and reputation. He did not respond right away, not from hesitation, but from understanding the value of waiting. Fearful people reveal themselves. He slipped the phone into his pocket and lifted his gaze to the night sky, fractured by city lights. There was no sense of victory, only clarity. Somewhere in a locked room, someone was holding the truth and shaking because of it. And Noah Carter, the man they once believed could be bought, was stepping into a moment where money no longer mattered. The truth had started to move, and this time it was not asking for permission. The call came just as Noah lay back on the bed, and this time they were no longer pretending. The family lawyer's voice came through the phone low and measured each word weighed like cold metal. He said they needed to meet in person first thing in the morning before everything slipped out of control. Noah stared at the ceiling, where the light cast a pale streak like an old scar. He asked what the meeting was for. To cool things down, to keep everything discreet, to avoid unnecessary misunderstandings. Noah stayed silent. That silence forced the man on the other end to keep talking faster now, offering more. He suggested neutral ground, a glass-walled office, transparent walls, a long table coffee ready. Noah agreed not because he wanted to negotiate, but because he wanted to see their faces when control began to crack. The next morning, Noah arrived early. The office sat high above a wide parking lot, where cars moved like anonymous pieces. He sat alone, back straight, hands resting on the cool surface of the table. When the door opened, they entered like a rehearsed formation. His mother-in-law, first her face pale, but carefully held together. His father-in-law followed shoulders, rigid eyes, avoiding his. Madeline came last, smaller somehow, her gaze unanchored. And between them, the lawyer suit perfectly pressed a thin smile, like velvet, wrapped around a blade. No one rushed to speak. Coffee was poured. Papers were set on the table. The lawyer began talking about tension, about media pressure, about the need for a reasonable solution for everyone. Noah listened without interrupting. He let them rebuild the story layer by layer until they believed it could stand on its own. Then the envelope slid toward him, thicker than before, heavier. Inside was a new offer, more money, broader confidentiality, a promise that everything would end here. His mother-in-law spoke with a trembling voice about protecting the family. His father-in-law talked about reputation, about the future. Madeline kept her head down, hands clenched in her lap, as if trying to hold together something that no longer had a shape. Noah didn't touch the envelope. He reached into his bag and placed 3 items on the table, aligned carefully in front of them. The wire transfer receipt, the notarized divorce filing, the confidentiality agreement with sections clearly marked. Thin paper, but its weight shifted the room. The lawyer's eyes dropped for a fraction of a second, before lifting again just long enough for Noah to know he had struck the right nerve. Noah said calmly that they had paid him to leave quickly. They had rushed him. They had tried to silence him before the truth could arrive. Pressure leaves fingerprints, and fingerprints do not disappear, because more money is offered. His father-in-law stood abruptly, voice rising, calling it absurd. Noah did not argue. He asked one short question: why did they need to rush so badly? The question landed on the table, and no one picked it up. Madeline looked up, eyes red, lips trembling. She said she never thought it would go this far. Noah held her gaze long enough for her to understand this was no longer about feelings. The lawyer tried to regain control. He said the agreement could be amended. Clauses added, everything handled quietly. Noah shook his head. He said he was not there to sell his silence. He was there to listen. And what he heard from them was fear. The lawyer's phone vibrated on the table. He reached for it too quickly and turned it face down, but not fast enough. Noah had already seen the preview on the screen. I cannot hold this anymore. He is going to tell everything. The room froze. His mother-in-law followed Noah's gaze and went pale. His father-in-law swallowed hard. Madeline's breathing quickened as if the air had been pulled away. Noah stood and said the conversation had gone far enough. The lawyer demanded they stop, his voice sharper, now the smoothness gone. Noah turned toward the door, just as his own phone vibrated in his pocket. A message. Tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock, roadside diner. Come alone. I have the recording. Noah did not turn back. Behind him, Madeline whispered his name, barely audible. He stepped into the glass hallway, where daylight exposed everything with brutal clarity. He felt no victory, only the road ahead coming into focus. Because when the truth is about to be unleashed in sound, money becomes meaningless. And people who rely on contracts to control outcomes must face what cannot be signed away. Noah stepped into the roadside diner just as the clock struck 7 in the morning, and the man waiting for him already looked like someone with nowhere left to run. The neon sign outside flickered with tired insistence, blue and red light bleeding across scratched glass. Inside, the smell of hot grease and burnt coffee clung to the air like a confession no one bothered to hide. Noah chose a booth against the wall, his back to the window, not out of fear, but because he needed focus. Truth demands complete attention. The man across from him wore a baseball cap pulled low and a mask covering half his face. His eyes kept darting toward the door, as if the door itself might accuse him. He did not greet Noah or offer his name. He simply placed his phone on the table face down and slid it toward Noah with 2 lightly trembling fingers. He said he could not stay long, his voice rough and uneven. He said he had not slept since Friday. Noah did not reach for the phone. He let the silence do its work. People tell the truth more easily when they do not feel rushed. The man began to speak. They told us it was urgent, he said. Special handling. Confidential. No paper trail beyond the minimum. He thought it was just rich people used to giving orders. Then he asked questions. And when he asked, he realized who was setting the tempo for everything. Noah asked who. The man inhaled deeply, then exhaled as if stepping off a high ledge. The family lawyer. He came in himself. He did not send an assistant. He did not email. He stood there smiling and said everything had to be finished before the wedding. He said the family could not afford uncertainty. He said mistakes would be unfortunate. What kind of mistakes? Noah asked. The man swallowed hard. The kind that would land on someone lower down. Noah nodded once. It was a language he understood. Systems always need a sacrifice. The man unlocked the phone, his hands shaking enough that he had to try twice. He slid it back toward Noah. The recording is there. He said he recorded it because he needed insurance, because something told him the truth would one day demand proof. Noah pressed play. The voice filled the small diner, calm and cultured, the sound of a man accustomed to closing rooms. He said this needed to be settled before the ceremony, that too much was at stake to let timing interfere. A woman's voice followed, strained and frightened, asking what would happen if the results did not match. The reply came smoothly, that results can always be interpreted. Then a brief silence. Then the sentence that froze the air. The father of the baby is me, and you are not going to destroy a family over biology. The audio ended. The diner suddenly felt louder forks clinking coffee, pouring a truck rumbling past outside the world, continuing without concern, sharing space with something poisonous. Noah did not react outwardly. Inside him, something clicked shut, clean and final. So it was not just an affair, Noah said quietly. The man shook his head. It was a plan. Noah saved the file and sent it to Tessa immediately with a single word. Audio. The response came back before his screen dimmed. Do not confront anyone. Come straight to me now. Noah looked at the man across from him and told him he had done the right thing. The man let out a humorless laugh. He hoped that was true. He stood quickly, dropped cash on the table, and disappeared out the door without looking back, like someone fleeing his own life. Noah remained seated for another beat, letting the coffee go cold. When he stood, he did not feel shaken. He felt precise. At Tessa's office, she listened to the recording twice. The first time her expression did not change. The second time she removed her glasses and leaned back, staring at the ceiling as if plotting the trajectory of a falling object. This changes everything she said. Noah told her he did not want a spectacle. He did not want children punished for adult decisions. Tessa nodded. Then we do this clean, legal, permanent. She outlined it like a checklist. Fraud, coercion, abuse of authority, witness intimidation. Enough leverage to make people accustomed to standing above consequences, finally look down. Noah's phone vibrated. Madeline's name appeared. He did not answer. Instead, he watched Tessa organize the evidence into folders, labels precise, each piece placed exactly where it belonged. For the first time since the kiss on his forehead, in that overly bright kitchen, Noah did not feel satisfaction. He felt control. He did not need to shout or demand. He only needed to place the truth on the table and let it speak for itself. Outside, the day had fully broken, and in that light, those who had believed money and reputation could bury anything were losing their greatest advantage. Silence. The final meeting did not take place in a courtroom, but in a glass-walled room where every word had space to echo. Noah entered with Tessa unhurried. The room overlooked a rain-soaked parking lot, the smell of hot asphalt mixing with cold moisture. On the table sat a pot of coffee no one touched, like an unnecessary prop in a negotiation that had already taken shape. Across from them, his mother-in-law sat upright, her face drained of its familiar color. His father-in-law kept his hands tightly clasped, as if afraid they might tremble. The family lawyer sat at the head of the table, leaning back, still trying to hold on to the composure that once commanded respect. Madeline arrived last. She stepped in slowly, smaller within her own body, like someone who had just let go of a structure she had been holding up for too long. No one exchanged greetings. Tessa placed the folder on the table and opened it without haste, turning to a single page. The transcript of the recording. Not complete, not dramatic, just enough that no one in the room could pretend they had never heard it. The lawyer glanced down. His jaw tightened for a brief moment. Then he closed the folder himself, as if that gesture could somehow retract the sound that already existed. "This will not end well," he said quietly. "Truth rarely does," Noah replied evenly. His mother-in-law leaned forward and asked what he wanted. The familiar question. The question they always used to turn everything into numbers. Noah inhaled slowly, as if preparing for an important meeting. He said he did not want more money. He did not want a public apology. He did not want to negotiate his dignity. His father-in-law scoffed and asked why they were even there. Noah looked at each of them in turn, long enough for them to understand the answer could not be interrupted. He said there were 3 things. First, they would retract every statement, formal or informal, that painted him as greedy, vindictive, or bought. He would not be recast as the villain to protect their image. Madeline lowered her head and nodded faintly, a delayed reflex. Second, what belonged to him would be returned properly, not as a favor, but as acknowledgement. Assets he helped build. Accounts he helped create. No clauses implying guilt where there was none. No agreement turning silence into confession. The lawyer shifted in his chair for the first time, unable to hide his tension. Third, Noah said more slowly, choosing each word as if for the children not yet born. They would face the consequences, fully and decently, for the children. Not in the shadows, not with scapegoats, with responsibility. His mother-in-law shook her head, tears rising, saying they could not. Noah interrupted gently. They could. Because if they did not, the next version of this conversation would not be private. The room fell into stillness. The lawyer leaned back, his eyes moving quickly, calculating exits. He asked if Noah would expose everything. Noah said he would expose the truth. Those were different things. Madeline finally spoke. She said she did not think it would go this far. Noah looked at her, his gaze no longer angry, only carrying a truth that arrived too late. "It always goes this far," he said, "when people keep choosing the easy lie." The agreement was rewritten on the spot. Language adjusted, clauses removed. Lines once meant to protect reputations were rewritten to protect privacy, nothing more. The lawyer signed last, pressing the pen harder than necessary, as if trying to leave a mark. No one smiled. No one celebrated. Noah stood and put on his coat. He turned toward Madeline. She opened her mouth as if to say something, perhaps an apology, perhaps a memory. Noah shook his head once gently. She did not need to say anything else. She already had when she let them speak for her. Outside, the air was cool and clean. The rain had stopped, and the pavement reflected the sky, like a second chance that did not ask permission. Noah walked to his car, placed his hands on the steering wheel, and breathed. There was no sense of victory. Only the relief of someone who had finally set a burden down. The truth does not need noise. It only needs to be placed in the right position. The next morning, Noah woke to a single message, short and cold as steel. Everything has begun. He stood by the window, watching the distant water change color under the early sun. The city woke as if nothing had happened. People walked their dogs. A bus stopped at its usual corner. An elderly couple passed by, moving slowly but steadily, as if time had learned to respect them. Noah drew a deep breath. This was the moment when stories usually turn, not with explosions, but with a silence that lasts longer than comfort allows. Tessa called while he was putting on his jacket. Her voice was firm, leaving no room for hesitation. The recording had been authenticated. The chain of evidence was locked. People who once stood above the law were panicking, searching for exits. She did not need to say names. Noah already knew. Some kinds of power exist only as long as others believe they cannot be touched. That same morning, calls began spreading like oil on water. People who had never answered before were calling repeatedly. Those who once used intermediaries now asked to speak directly. Noah did not respond. He did not need to. Truth once released from the hands of those who control it, finds its own path. Somewhere else, Madeline sat alone in the room once called the bridal suite. The flowers were still there, the edges of the petals beginning to wilt. The wedding dress had been put away, not folded carefully, just shoved aside like something that no longer mattered. She stared at her reflection for a long time, not to fix anything, but to recognize the woman looking back at her. For the first time, she understood what it felt like to be written out of her own story. The family lawyer sent one final email, its politeness almost empty. He said they would comply with every revised term. They would retract all statements. They would address the consequences quietly. Noah read it and saved it. No emotion, no satisfaction. He knew those words did not come from awakening, but from fear. Sometimes fear is enough to prevent further harm. In the afternoon, Noah drove out of the city. Not to run, to leave at the right moment. He stopped at a roadside rest area, bought a cup of coffee, and sat outside. The wind moved lightly. A group of students laughed loudly nearby. A middle-aged man spoke into his phone, apologizing to someone, his voice rough. Life kept going messy and honest. Noah thought about the path behind him, about how he had been seen as someone on the sidelines, someone easy to settle with, someone who should take the money and disappear. They never understood that real power does not need display. It lives in staying calm when others panic, in refusing to react to provocation, in knowing how to wait for the right moment. Tessa sent another message. There would be internal investigations. It could take time, but the gears were turning. Noah replied briefly. That was enough. He did not need to watch anyone fall to know he was standing. What he needed was to know the cycle had been broken. As the sun sank lower, Noah pulled over by the water. Small waves moved steadily, indifferent to power structures or contracts signed behind closed doors. He sat on a stone bench and let his thoughts slow. No more strategy, no next move, only acceptance. He understood that truth does not always bring perfect justice, but it brings something more important: choice. The choice not to keep living inside a story written by others. The choice to walk away with his back straight and his eyes open. Somewhere behind him, a system was adjusting itself, not from morality, but from survival. Ahead of him, the road opened, promising nothing except honesty. Noah stood, brushed his hands lightly, and returned to his car. He carried no victory with him. He carried peace. And sometimes that is the most enduring form of power. The truth broke free at a moment when no one was prepared to shield it, and that was what made it echo longer than any scream. Noah knew the story was finished when he received the final call from Tessa, her voice calm in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. She said everything had been filed according to procedure. The terms were now in effect. Investigations were moving from whispers into formal records. No further action was required from him. Noah ended the call and stood still for a long time, not because he felt empty, but because for the first time in months, nothing demanded a reaction from him. He returned to the old house to collect what remained, not to remember, but to close. The empty rooms carried the sound of his footsteps. Afternoon light cut through the windows, drawing long shapes across the wooden floor. Noah changed the locks, deleted old contacts, filed documents into a drawer labeled closed. Each small action carried a sense of finality, like placing a period at the end of a sentence that had gone on too long. His phone vibrated. Madeline's name appeared one last time. Noah looked at the screen without hesitation and deleted it. Not out of anger, not as punishment, simply as a choice he had never allowed himself before. The next morning he walked along the water. The early air was thin and cool. Older couples passed by, moving slowly, comfortable in their silence. A coffee vendor opened a small stand, the scent of roasted beans drifting softly on the breeze. Noah bought a cup, and watched the horizon brighten. He did not feel victorious. He felt light. Somewhere else, the people who once believed their power was untouchable were learning a different lesson, not about morality, but about limits. Once sound exists, once evidence leaves a closed room, no agreement is thick enough to swallow it back. Silence had been their weapon. Now it no longer stood with them. Noah did not follow the news. He did not need to know whose name appeared where, or what specific consequences unfolded. He had placed the truth on the table. The rest belonged to systems scrambling to survive. That was not indifference. It was a boundary. He thought about the very first moment, the light kiss on the forehead, the kitchen too bright, the sentence that sounded like reassurance, but was really a goodbye. He thought about signing his name, taking the money, and leaving quietly. Back then, everyone believed the story was over. But a story does not end when someone is paid to stay silent. It ends when that person chooses not to live inside a version written by others. Noah understood that not everyone has the luxury to wait. Not everyone holds evidence in their hands. But everyone shares one thing coming: the moment to stop reacting, the moment to observe, the moment to say no without raising your voice. He walked more slowly, feeling each breath. Real power does not live in making others afraid. It lives in no longer being controlled by your own fear. It lives in calm when others lose control, in knowing when to ask the right question and when silence speaks louder. If you stayed with this story until here, let Noah ask you something honestly. If you were in his place, would you have signed and walked away? Or would you have waited, watched and placed the truth on the table when it was ready to be heard? Write your answer in the comments and tell us where you are listening from. If stories like this, quiet truths and endings that do not need fireworks but leave space for you to breathe, matter to you, please like and subscribe. We share stories like these every day, and your presence truly matters more than you think.